Thank you for coming into this platform. We wanted to make sure to have an opportunity to have a more in-depth and intimate conversation, as with the platform that we have, we couldn't see folks' faces. So we'll give maybe 1 more minute for Yvette to join us. And I know folks are also looking for the Zoom link, pero bienvenidos.
I see some familiar faces. Clemen, David.
Hola, hola.
No te he visto desde hace mucho tiempo, Camila.
I know. Esta pandemia nos tiene, pero pronto, ya pronto. Dr. Daisy. Ryan.
And Clemen is will be our panelist on July 15. So she'll give maybe a little bit of intro of what that conversation will be about as well. So happy to have you, Clemen.
I'm happy to be here. I was trying to straighten my hair, Camila, before I came here.
I wanted to have my hair curly today, pero no dio tiempo. I love your hair, Clemen.
Thank you. Thank you. Yvette spoke so much through, I mean, it is incredible. And it looks like it was, like everything seems like it's in history, but it's not. Because about 2 months ago, someone said that. So, oh, what about if you straighten your hair? And I was like, what century is this? Did I go back in time? But it's an everyday fight. So it was nice, all the information that Yvette presented. That's so awesome.
Sí, como mencionó ella, this is definitely just the beginning as well. And I think, Yvette, are you online? I saw her.
Sí,
oh,
estoy aquí.
Hola, presente.
Hola.
Muchísimas gracias de nuevo. Estamos dando un poquito de tiempo for folks to continue to join this conversation, but I think, you know, we can get started and we'll allow folks to join us as they come. But for now, I just wanted to again thank you, Yvette, so much for getting us started. And the purpose of the Fire Chat is really truly an opportunity to, one, be able to see people's faces. The platform that we were just on doesn't allow for us to have more intimate, in-depth discussions about this. And we wanted to make sure that we followed up here in a smaller group setting where we have an opportunity to see each other, but also have Yvette, you know, as an opportunity to dive deeper into that. So I don't know, Camila, if you have other, you know, I know that we had other questions, but I would love to just give you an opening and Yvette an opening to share more if we've missed due to time on what we could have shared in the presentation and in the first half of this.
Yeah, I mean, wow, it was so much covered. I know that there were questions about mental health, kind of examples on how have we Afro-descendientes and Afro-Latinx individuals, you know, been affected from a mental health perspective, like, you know, body image and, you know, just identity crisis issues, and then, you know, emotional health. So maybe talking about something, example, or something close to that. Yvette, si tienes un ejemplo.
Sí, no, that's no, I'll answer, but I'm curious to hear how people are feeling. So I would want to hear more from people. I just talked for a whole 45 minutes. A mí me gusta, a mí me gusta ir de la otra gente. It's like, so, you know, you get it. It's like, oh God, Yvette, please stop talking. It's like 45 minutos seguidos. That's a lot. Saben que, you know, it was that that shook me the most. You know, how do you explain 20 years of being seen and loved and told you're smart and told you're pretty and told that you can do whatever you want to do, and then I come here and they saying, no, you're not smart. You know, like I literally would look at my college professors, because I grew up in the American territory in Panama. I was privy to, you know, the colonization of the Americans in Panama. So I went to an American high school, but my college professors just could not understand that. So they would come up to me and be like, do you need help reading that? I already read that. Like they, you know, like their whole thing was, no, I couldn't be equally or more prepared than the American classmates because I came from Panama, because their version of an immigrant is not supposed to be educated. You're not supposed to be savvy enough to have read all these things. So I literally spent my freshman year going, I speak fluent English. I went to an American high school. So it really messed me up. I mean, that's probably why I'm a clinician. I mean, my background, I started and I switched my major. I'm a counseling psychologist. Because, you know, to then literally just go with, I grew up where people would tell you you're pretty every day. And I came to Boston and be like, people didn't even look at you. And then to associate that meant that Blackness wasn't pretty, you know, and that Black wasn't smart. Like, I really struggled. So when I do these presentations, this is not just about my research as an intellectual doing the work, but it's also my personal story that's absolutely mixed into it. So when people say, oh, what is it like? No, I can tell you what it's like. You know, I literally had a classmate that lived on my same floor, and she was Cuban. And everybody knew she was Cuban. And by the time I finished in my undergrad at Emmanuel, everybody knew I was Panamanian, because I started the Latino group. I was doing all kinds of stuff to just be like, I am here, you know. And she never spoke to me. She never, even though people knew that we were both Latinas, she never spoke to me. One year we were stuck in the airport together. I don't remember if we were coming back to campus or going away, because she was from Miami and I was going home to Panama, and you know, my layover was Miami. Y fue la primera vez que me habló. And I looked at her and I said, interesante que me estás hablando ahora, you know. And she was like, oh no, you really do speak Spanish. I said, yes. And she said, oh, where are you going? I said, Panama. And she goes, ¿de verdad eres de Panamá? Yo dije, yes. And you have spent 2 years walking around me, and it took for us to be stuck in the airport for her to finally recognize me. So imagine that, you know, like when my young people come, when I put that thing that says schizophrenic, mis jóvenes, los muchachos vienen, Miss Yvette, lo siguió la policía, and they're giving me this whole story, and I'm like, ¿qué hicieron? ¿Qué no hicieron? ¿Qué estaban diciendo? And they're like, no one was talking, we didn't do anything. And then I just sort of sit in front of them and I wait for them to get to the place on their own. And the ones that are darker skinned will be like, nos estaban siguiendo porque somos negros. And then the ones that are lighter skin are like, no, pero no estábamos actuando así, no estábamos. So they didn't, you know, it's their first moment of having a Black experience. But imagine you have that experience, you can't go home and talk about that, because in your home, they're telling you, tú no eres negro. Tú eres dominicano, tú eres puertorriqueño, tú eres costarricense, pero tú no eres negro. So these kids hold on to these stories for a week until they see me. And then they get to process it, because they can't process it at home. One more example. In my trainings, I do walk across the room. Y era un entrenamiento of mothers and daughters. And I say, walk across the room if you're of African descent. Daughter walks, mother stays. Daughter walks, and she is bawling as she stands there without her mother. Her mother is looking at her, doesn't move, because I also say, if you say no, stand. If you don't know, go in the middle. If it's yes, move. Mom doesn't move. So I go through, the list of, I go through and I try to touch base with everybody. So I go to the young girl and she says, yo no entiendo por qué mi mamá no cruza conmigo. Ella es negra. Ella es más negra que yo. So you would think that mom would move when she hears this from her daughter. Mom still doesn't move. So I go to mom and I say, ¿qué está pensando en ver a su hija llorar así, que usted no ha cruzado? And she's like, ella siempre está con esa cosa de que somos negros. And I say to mom, ¿y usted qué piensa que es? Pues mi abuela fue india, she says. But if you understand how Dominican Republic categorizes, they don't use the word black. Black, they use the word India. So ella dice que yo soy Indian. I was like, So I'm looking at mom like, okay, I'm going to challenge you right now. And it's like, mire, le voy a preguntar una pregunta, pero y se va a incomodar un poco. Pero ¿de dónde usted piensa que consiguió ese color? And she literally paused. And this woman was darker than me. Y ella no pudo decir la palabra porque yo soy negra. You know what she said to me? She said, yo no entiendo la pregunta. So that's how deeply impacting it affects our mental health. It affects our physical health. It affects our movement. Yo tengo niñas que no vienen a la escuela if they didn't get to the hair salon to brush out their kinks. Porque no quieren que nadie vea que, tienen natural y tienen el cabello curly. So for those who may not think this is so deeply rooted, I say, yes, it is. It messes people up. It really has a deep impact on folks. If I didn't come from what I come from, I would be in some corner trying to get myself out, because the stuff was like constant.
Thanks, Yvette. Does anyone else want to share, ask questions? This is a safe space.
And it's no bad question.
Exacto, no, nada correcto o incorrecto. Brian Hernández.
Hi, buenas tardes. I'm from Inver Hills Community College. I don't know if you guys know Gabrielle. Well, she's the one who sent out the link to us for the school. So,
Oh, I know. She's a cultural liaison for Inver.
Mhm.
Ah, okay, sí.
Yeah. So ahorita, with all the talk on critical race theory, people want to make it a bigger deal, and conservatives don't like that. How important is it that we teach it to like los niños en la escuela, and like why should it be seen as a bigger deal?
Yeah. It is a deal because race defines so much in this country. Like, it's a real thing, so to exclude that conversation is excluding the history of this nation and what defines the history of this nation. This country, you have people dismissing the critical race theory. You have people dismissing the 1619 Project. You have people not honoring the Tulsa massacre. So you have all these things, and the bottom line is the common theme around that is the dismissal of a history, dismissal of a truth. And we need to push back on it. This is not just an African-American conversation as it relates to the critical race theory. This is a conversation within this Latino community because it plays itself out here. So it is a big deal. It is a necessary conversation that I think the Latino community needs to just engage with just as much as we are as African-American community is saying this is what needs to happen. We need to be in that conversation also.
I agree. As a professor from a university, and have dealt with that situation. As you see, I changed the color of my hair. It's dark and curly, but I changed it. But, you know, that is very crucial to emphasize not only the Afro-Latinidad, but Latinidad and, you know, everything that surrounds it. Because myself, I've experienced that racism in a college, community, university setting. So if students are not educated, if students are not just given the tools, so when they're out there, like you mentioned, that person was with you 2 years and she didn't even realize you were a Afro-Latina, you know what I mean? So that happens with myself. You know, people don't think I come from a Afro-Latino background. And I'm like, just because I'm white doesn't mean I don't come from that descendants, you know what I mean? And it just, especially living in the state of Minnesota, you really want to educate those, including your children, those around you, of how important diversity is and everything that's going on, especially in, you know, colleges and universities, school districts, however, because it starts from a specific age. Well, smaller kids don't really see it, but once you hit that middle school and beyond, then you start noticing it. And like you said, parents need to be educated as well, not just the school system and the colleges and universities, but the parents of those systems as well.
What I've seen in our Latino families is that we want to protect our kids. So a lot of our immigrant families don't want the kids to know who they are because they think that by not telling them the truth, by not telling them what they're going to face with, they keep them safer. No, that doesn't work. You know, one of my young girls fought me tooth and nail, cried in our program when we talked about her identity being an Afro-Latina and Afro-Dominican and the roots and everything. Cried, peleaba. You know, yo no soy negra, Miss Yvette, yo no soy negra, yo soy dominicana, yo soy negra. But they live in this bubble where they only see themselves. They only see Dominicans, they only see Puerto Ricans. But then what happens? She goes to college and she has a white roommate. You know, and this is a young girl that's been walking around, trigueña, but walking around saying, yo soy blanca, yo soy dominicana, yo no soy negra. Now is faced with this roommate that is white. They have an incident, and the first thing out of the roommate's mouth is what? You Negro trying to walk around here thinking you one of me. And what does she do? She knocks her out and gets expelled from campus. I mean, but the thing is that if we would have done a better preparation of having her understand that even in her whiteness within the Latino community, when she comes out of this safety space, she's not white in the larger context. And then that's what shakes them up. Then I have my young people coming back and go, oh, Miss Yvette, now I see what you were talking about. But the parents are doing a great unjust to those kids by not having those real conversations.
But it also depends on if the parents are educated themselves, right?
Yes.
We need to make sure that the parents are also educated and learning. And I think everything that's happening in society now is waking up those parents to engage and be in those perspectives to learn these new disciplines so their children can have that backup, like you mentioned. We all have, myself included, you know, have had to educate myself beyond what I've learned, you know, even being an educated woman, Puerto Rican woman, right? I still have to educate myself because I still have to relate to that different racism throughout, you know, the country, the state, everywhere.
Yeah.
Yes, but we have also to think sometimes it's so much racism within our culture and our community that even when you teach your child about Afro-Latinidad or his identity as a Black man or a Black boy, the community does not welcome him as a Black boy or as a Black man. So you have this struggle that you want him to be proud of being Latino, but then he's not welcomed by the Latino community. And how do you protect your child for being hurt by the community when he goes to a party and he say none of the girls want to dance with him because he's a Black man, or none of the people wants to join with him because he's a Black boy? So it's that balance that sometimes you have to have as a parent. It's not just the parent, but it's the community at all that have to be aware of the Blackness in our own community.
Ay, gracias
Yvette.
por eso, doña
Gracias.
Sonia. Gracias, gracias por esta verdad. Es una verdad. Y duele. Me dio escalofrío solo oírla, porque tengo 2 sobrinos y duele, porque el rechazo es tan impactante que duele mucho, especialmente para los varones. You know, the boys get another level of profiling that, you know, Black women get it, you know, but the boys get it in a way, you know, when Trayvon Martin was killed. I have a piece in this book, The Trayvon Martin and Us, and my opening was the first person I wanted to talk to was my nephew, who at the time was in his teens. And Christian now is going into his junior year in college. And it wasn't until he saw the George Floyd result that he now sees justice being served. But he has lived a life in a context that he has seen Black men get killed and no justice. And here it is, he's a Black Panamanian African-American young boy who has to worry about his safety. So it's real. El rechazo es and the only thing we can do is, you know, I'm sure Doña Sonia, when they come back home, is to just love them up. Love them up. Love them up. Give them all the love, all the positive, the reinforcement, porque no lo van a conseguir completamente afuera.
No. And we used to tell you are 100% African American and 100% Puerto Rican. Yeah. You know, and he said, well, I'm 200% of an individual. I said, yes, because you can negate none of those 2 aspects in your life. That's who you are. Yeah. But, you know, it was difficult when you go to the park and the kids don't want to play with him because he's a Black boy, you know, and you just like sitting in a corner almost about to cry. I mean, I know what to cry now thinking about it. But, you know, that's the reality that a lot of Black mothers go through with their Black kids. How is the community welcome or not welcome the Black children?
I want to say something in relate. Oh, sorry, Leo. Do you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
You put your hand up, and I'm like, what? But anyway, Yvette, in listening to La Señora Sonia, thinking of the challenges we have when we are Afro-Latinos, because we are not Latino enough, we are not super light, or we don't come from this and these communities. But it's a challenge with the African-American community too, because we are not really Black, because you are not born here and we're not from Africa. Yes, we are, but not the same that we have lived here. Yeah, since I came the same. Oh, no, but you don't know the history. So I like that Irma invited me to participate next week because I feel that the more I tell my story, the more people understand the challenges Afro-Latinos have. I don't have the, the background that Yvette has in this profound knowledge about Afro-Latinidad. But when Irma was saying to share a little bit about what it will be next week with Eddie, is more about the life of the stories, the things that happen to us all the time that of course happen to Yvette, I bet, in her family, but I feel that she has this mind that can understand the motivations and the background, and for us it's a little bit more the feeling, the sharing the story, I always say the 10 times the police department has stopped me since I lived in the United States, and they give me warnings. So I should be thankful. Of course, I got one ticket this last time 2 months ago, but it's a challenge for people from a more visual African background to deal with things, because it's almost like you are not enough good to be Latina, not enough good to be African American, and I just don't feel that I need to fit either. I just feel that I am in my own category, and I just would like people to recognize that category, that I don't need the approval from the Latino community nor from the African American community. I just need to have my own story and my own representation in my own room, but it's a very hard message to transmit.
I agree with you, Clement, because like I said in my presentation, I don't only study this, I live it. So, and I'm darker than you, so I'm sure we will even have different stories. And I think the African-American piece that's when African-Americans, to me, it becomes an American conversation, because Americans aren't taught about world history. Literally, when I came here, people didn't know where Panama was. I was like, you built the canal, so I think that is an American story. Americans aren't taught global history. So I think that, and the lie, when you read the Willie Lynch letter, the lie that was taught to all of us to not see each other, we really believed. So African Americans were not taught that we even existed. So when I meet African Americans, I understand why they don't recognize me, because the history that they're taught here does not teach them that we even exist, because the whitewashing of stories and of history, but also in that conversation around why African Americans may not behave a certain way, let's call our people out. Latinos be, straight up racist in their interactions with African Americans. So when African Americans are only hearing and having those experiences, by the time they meet us who are Afro-Latinos, which they don't get to meet very often, they don't see very often because we don't even come out in our community, then they're like, oh, who are you? And you get what I'm talking about? You understand me? So I don't fault African Americans, and some of you may disagree. I don't fault African Americans because they were not taught the story. They are not taught the true story. They're not taught the true history. And the only context within this country around African Americans and Latinos is the other. So African Americans are, you know, sort of done with the Latino community constantly stepping over them to get to where they want to go and leaving them behind. So the conversation is a two-way conversation, and I refuse to put blame and fault on the African American community for not recognizing us when this country has not shown us and doesn't teach about us.
Thank you, Yvette. Leo?
Sí. Bueno, muchísimas gracias a todos, a LatinoLEAD también por este foro. Yo soy mexicano, vine a los Estados Unidos a los 13 años y tuve la suerte de darme cuenta por sí mismo de una libertad del colonialismo a esa edad. Tuve la suerte también de darme cuenta de el ser inmigrante me da un privilegio en el cual yo no tengo, no llevo cargado la herencia de la opresión americana específicamente en relación a la comunidad afroamericana. Y de fortuna me casé con una mujer caribeña que es en los ojos de América a black woman. And frecuentemente yo tengo hijas que son, as I lovingly call them, Blaxican. I was lucky enough to realize when they were born that no matter how much I love them, the world, specifically in America, would view them as black, not as Caribbean black, and not as anything else, but their perspective, the world perspective of them would peg them as African American. And so with that, I just simply set out to try to build them as strong as possible, fully cognizant of the way the world interact with them, and that the only thing they could control is who they are. And I promise them I'd love them as they are, but that they would have to love themselves as they are in addition, otherwise all of the love I can give would not be sufficient. So in the context of, so as I see it, as I've taught him, is specifically in the context of the African American experience, is one that even with all of the things they have to experience, because they have me and because they have their mother and because they have an immigrant experience, they do own a certain amount of privilege that the African American experience does not provide. And that even in their case, they're not saddled with the entire burden of 400 years of oppression and the way that this country has beset on African Americans. And so that relationship, however frayed it might be with that community, which at times it is, they've lived through all the experiences that you have described. One is more visibly black than the other one. And so one gets preferential treatment in spaces. We as a family, unfortunately, have had to manage in the early days play dates in which my wife would simply say, "You go first." And it's sad, but that's what we had to do. And that happened in both in Latino spaces and in white spaces. And so, you know, I am glad, you know, I am fortunate is the way I've come to set out my experience, in that I awoken to issues of race and class early in my life. And I don't pretend to speak on behalf of my community. I am just lucky that as a person, that's how I ended up realizing the relationship between the shades of color that we are in Latin America. And that, you know, there is, but I'll finish with this. Both from an Afro-Latino, from a Latino, from a Mexican, The way I position things now is that if we all are pro-Black, pro-African American in this country, the bar, if it moves for African Americans, it moves even more for all of us. So if we empower and uplift our African American brothers and sisters, all of us will enjoy greater privileges because of it. And so, you know, because there is this undercurrent in some of our communities, like Latino community, that says, you know, African Americans are getting all of it right now.
Mm-hmm.
No, they're just not even getting what should be fairly their due. You know, the world, some of the world is trying to right 401 years of wrong, and if they do that, you know, then all of us, to a greater extent, will be even better off. So, you know, again, I'm incredibly grateful for this opportunity to listen to you and to try and advance the greater good of all of us in our communities.
Gracias por sus palabras. Le voy a decir a mi cuñada that I met this cool Mexican guy today. My sister-in-law is Mexicana de Puebla, and just hearing your story, and it's been the opposite in the sense for my brother and her, porque Felix, my brother, is a little lighter than me. Adriana es más indígena, se le ve, and Nicolás, their child, came out looking like you, Leo. So salió como mi, you know, bien mezclado con mi papá y con lo mexicano. So when Adriana would be at the park with Nicolás, you know, I will never forget the first time she called me. They live in Brooklyn, crying because someone approached her and asked her how much does she charge to take care of kids, automatically assuming that Nicolás was not her son. You know, and, you know, so that even plays itself out in those ways too, you know, so she then had to be like, oh my God, am I going? So it's funny when they go to stuff, because Adriana has been on the receiving end of some of that, they decide my brother goes first. You know, so it's interesting to hear you, because it confirms also my brother and my sister-in-law's experience. You know, I will never forget when they, you know, when they got married, and you know, the assumption is, you know, Felix is the Black one, so he's poor. So they were with one of Adriana's friends or something, y estaban enseñando fotos de la casa en Panamá, and, you know, a modest house, but everybody was like, oh, Felix took you to some fancy people's house, and Adriana was like, no, esa es la casa de Felix. Like, you know, like there was no like connection to that, you know, possibility. So gracias por su palabra. And, you know, it sounds like your girls are really lucky to have you and your wife as the parents, because you're not hiding the truth from them. And I think that is why some of our kids that are Afro-Latinos are walking around healthier than those that are denied the conversation and denied the truth. So those that are having spaces like you, y su esposa, you know, really engaging them in that conversation, they're going to be ready, and they're going to be better. And they're going to be, you know, what I don't think, you know, when I founded Encuentro Diaspora Afro, is that I think we as Afro-Latinos are true bridge builders. We have an opportunity to have the African-American community and the Latino community really meet, because we are both of those things, and we're not willing to dismiss any of those. So we become a bridge in teaching the African-American community about, you know, Black history in Latin America, and in teaching the Latino community about how that African-American story sits in how we are dealt with and treated. You know, so I think we need to see it as a positive and not a negative.
Yvette, do you have time for one last question?
Yeah.
Yes, Dondi?
Yes, and it's really not a question. It's really to kind of piggyback on what Leo was saying. Something that I hope we all realize is that affirmative action is their game. And it really, if you look at the statistics, more Caucasian women have benefited from affirmative action than there are Black people total. If you just say African Americans or Afro-Latinos. And one of the reasons why there is such a big hoopla about affirmative action type practices is because to take it away actually levels the playing field for them now. Because for years they put that bar there and all minorities were going out and doing what they needed to do to meet that bar, going to school, getting certified, starting businesses. Now, we collectively as minorities, I don't care what race you identify with, we conquer, get together, we're doing better. And the only way, that's one way to just pretty much put us all in our place, is to take away affirmative action, make it equal for them to come back and get the jobs that they locked us out of for years anyways. So yes, we as parents, it's a catch-22. You want to protect them, but you want them to know that once you step outside the door, this is what it is. This is the reality. But that shit doesn't go away once they turn 18 or 21. It actually gets progressively worse because as you climb the ladder, it's fewer of us in every environment that we're in. Fewer doctors, fewer nurses, fewer teachers, fewer everything. And we're always going to be one of only or one of a few in whatever environment we're in. It never goes away. Just like Yvette said, it never goes away. So at some point it's going to hit you. If you're a kid and it hits you, or if you're an adult and it hits you, it's gonna hit you that, hey, it really is just that simple for them. It's black and white. That's all they see.
Mm-hmm. And I thank you for that comment. And I have something at 5, but my only response to ditto is I think everybody needs to read Nicole Hannah-Jones's 8-page response to UNC, because that's exactly what Ms. Dondi is speaking of. Look at that woman, got as high as she got, did all the right things, and was denied tenure because of someone's whiteness being threatened by her blackness and her truth.
Right.
This woman won the Pulitzer Prize.
And they're always going to, it's always going to be more difficult.
Absolutely. And she, her response, she is in shock. Because, you do all the things, you check all the boxes, and then all of a sudden, the only reason she was not given tenure was someone felt threatened by her position as a Black woman, speaking her truth and writing her writing
in a country where we are guaranteed the right to speak freely.
Exactly.
In one of 2 countries in the whole world where we have the right to pursue whatever we want to be happy.
Exactly. So I say,
except for a minority, don't you pursue shit.
Yeah.
Because
so
it may make me unhappy.
Yeah, so I think people need to realize that here it is. There was an Afro-Latina professor at Harvard that her students loved her, and she was denied tenure. So we need to start paying attention that it doesn't stop. It goes on and on and on, and it plays itself out differently. But and at the core of it, I'm proud to be Panamanian. I don't feel the need to sit in the word Latino because it doesn't see me. 2 years ago, I finally came to peace with the fact that I've been trying to accommodate and fit into a term that does not and is unwilling to see me. But what they won't take away is that I'm Panamanian. So I'm Afro-Panamanian. in the context of why I need to use the word Afro-Latino, I use it, but I also know that in using it, I am diluting a sense of myself because that Latino word does not see me. So all Afro-Latinos that are walking around, que soy Afro-Latino, you have to recognize and make peace with the fact that even if you use it, they still don't care. They still don't see you. So the question is, sit in who you really are and how you're really seen, and that is your Blackness.
I just wanted to say just a comment, because I want to make clear from a comment that I made that when we come here, a lot of African Americans don't feel that we have suffered enough. It's like, I just want to say that I say it in the sense that people think that we are just born here the day that we come to the United States and we never suffer in our countries. And so I just wanted to leave it clear that there is a lot of suffering here, 400 years, but we were slaves. But at the same time, my parents' families didn't approve their marriage because one was lighter than the other. So I have been negated lots of things in my country for being Black. So it's not a competition about who has suffered more, but it's about recognizing that being minority inside of a minority has a lot of different challenges.
Absolutamente. Well, I have to go because I have something at 5. I look forward to next week. Let me know if there's anything that we need to know between now and then. I think, Brian, you look like you're the youngest one here, so I hope you take it back to your campus and start some trouble, some good trouble, some good trouble. And if you need some backup, just bring me along.
Will do. I appreciate it too.
And we'll start some good trouble together. You know, now Irma and Camila, you guys are familiar now. So when there's trouble to be made, let's start some trouble.
Let's make some noise.
Let's make some noise. So I'll see you all next week. All of you, thank you so much.
Gracias a todos.
Much love and admiration. Take care.